23 to the Jacksonville Jaguars. They traded back with the Minnesota Vikings. They took Brian Thomas Jr. They have an interesting room. Gabe Davis, Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, and Brian Thomas Jr. Obviously, they have Evan Ingram and Travis Etienne as well. I don't get me wrong. I like the pick, Dobbs. I do. I do like Brian Thomas Jr. a lot. I think he would have been much better off in an offense with a kind of solidified wide receiver one. Because it's like I could see Brian Thomas Jr. being asked to be the wide receiver one and basically getting all the attention where he kind of gets shut down. Like, I think that's why he was so good at LSU was because they had another guy in Malik Neighbors, you know? Like, I'm not trying to compare him to Juju, but Juju was much better when Antonio Brown was there.
No, I agree. Here's my thing. I hear what you're saying, but on that same side, I'll just say it like this because it's just food for thought, you know? Because I agree with what you're saying. It's just food for thought. It's the same thing though as how like that was what people were saying about Jay Jettas with Jamar Chase. Is it was like, well, he's the guy who has the more touchdowns and all that because Jamar's just taking the attention off of him. Well, we've seen that that's not the case. And I think more than anything, what I do love about Brian Thomas, where I think he actually can be a number one, is he's shown, look, I can beat press coverage. I can get off the line versus anybody. I definitely got the size to win most matchups. So you know what? I'll say of a lot of the receivers in the first round, I actually think Brian Thomas is one of the few that's kind of primed to actually maybe be able to thrive in a role where he's going to be a number one. But either way, I think Christian Kirk is still going to be that number one with Trevor Lawrence with that connection they have. So it's kind of like either way. I do love Brian Thomas to the Jaguars, and I think I love it even more because I do think that's who they were going to be targeting at 17. They discussed, they said, yeah, we can move down a little bit and still get our guy. And that's exactly what they did, assumingly. So if you're a Jags fan, at least you got some capital back, even though it wasn't a ton, and you still very likely got your guy. So you have to be happy about that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, if you look at Brian Thomas Jr., that is a good idea to think of it like that, where it's like Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. Like, that's a unique view because we could see. I mean, like, you got to think of it the other way too. Then Malik Neighbors, who's really that? Like, I don't really count Darius Slayton as like a guy that's going to take attention away from you, you know. And he just is getting older, so I'm interested to see how the rookie seasons go. I think the receiving talent on the Jaguars is better than the Giants, but I think Brian Thomas Jr. honestly adds like just a different type of receiver to this offense, like big body and fast. Like Gabe Davis, you know how I feel about him. I know you're not super high in him. The combination of
And you know how I
Ingram,
feel about Gabe Davis.
yeah, I think the combination of Thomas Jr., Kirk, and Ingram is really something that could scare a defense.
No, and I think to that point, last thing on it that I have, but I'll tell you this because I think it's crazy, but it's true. You know, all of a sudden, Brian Thomas Jr. could have definitely a better rookie year than Malik Neighbors. He
Interesting.
definitely could.
Interesting.